In this video, we're going to get the To-Do API back on Heroku. Before we do though, let's go ahead and connect to our production database via RoboMongo so we can manage that data. We have some really old leftover data from before we updated the To-Do and user models. Now to get the URL, we know we can run a command from the terminal. Heroku config would work, or more specifically, we can run Heroku config :get followed by the environment variable name, Mongo, db_URI, and what we get back is a really long connection string. Now this connection string actually contains a ton of really useful information. We're going to need to know which piece is which because we're going to have to add all of this into individual fields inside of the RoboMongo application. In RoboMongo, if we go ahead and add a new connection by clicking the two computers and clicking create, you see that we don't get a place for a long connection string. Instead, we have things like address, port, and under authentication, we have things like database, username, and password. All of this exists inside of the string we have right here. Now, the first part, the part I have highlighted, this is the protocol. It's a MongoDB connection request. Next up, we have the username and password. This starts after the protocol and it goes up to the @ symbol. Right in the middle somewhere, you should see a colon. Everything before the colon, what I have highlighted here is the username. Everything between the colon and the @ symbol, that is the password. Now, after @ we have the address itself. After the address, we have the port. And after the port, we have a / followed by the database. We're going to go ahead and transfer all of this information into RoboMongo, starting with the actual address. Everything from @ to the colon. I'm going to copy this to the clipboard, move over into RoboMongo, and paste it right in the address field under connection. I can also give this connection a name, Heroku To-Do API. Next up, let's go ahead and grab the port. The port, which we can get over inside of the terminal, is 17736. I'm going to copy that, move into RoboMongo, and paste it right here. Next up, under authentication, we're going to have to perform authentication, providing a database, a username, and a password. We can keep the auth mechanism, the default value as shown here. First up, the database. The database is the very end of the connection string. After the /, we have our database name. We can simply copy this, take it, and paste it into the database field. Next up, username and password. Let's do the username first. Over inside of the terminal, we have our username right here, and you'll notice the username is actually identical to the database name. I'm going to go ahead and copy it anyways in case yours is not, though it should be. And over inside of RoboMongo, we can paste it inside of the username field. The last field to copy is the password that exists over inside of the connection string between the colon and the @ symbol. I'm going to copy this, paste it inside of RoboMongo, and before we click save, go ahead and click the test button. The test button is going to test the connection before you actually save the details, so if something goes wrong, you can change it without having to edit the existing connection. Right here, we have a couple check marks. It looks like everything did go as expected. I can close the test, save the connection, and then we can connect to the database by double-clicking it. Now, over in the left-hand side, we have our local Mongo database, and we have our Heroku To-Do API database. I can open up the individual database, go into collections, and inside of here we have a to-dos collection. This has some really old data, so I'm going to go ahead and drop this. Now we have our database with no collections and no documents. This means that we are good to go. We can deploy to Heroku and everything should work as expected. Now, things are only going to work as expected because we have all our environment variables configured, including the database URL and the JWT secret. If you do not have the JWT secret configured from the last video, this call is not going to work as expected. Make sure to have a value right here, just like we set up previously. With this in place, though, I can run git status to confirm I have no changes that need to be committed, and I can run git push Heroku master to deploy to Heroku. This is going to take about 15 seconds. After it actually finishes, it'll take about another 15 seconds to get the service started, but once it's up and running, we can play around with it inside of Postman, making sure everything works as expected. Right here, we are verifying the deploy. Everything looks like it went well, and we're back at the terminal. Let's go ahead and test things out over inside of Postman. Now over inside of Postman, we need to switch from to-do app local to-do app Heroku. But once we do, we can make any of the requests we previously set up. I'm going to get started by creating a user. We can make the user with the default data since no users exist. I can send this off. And down below, we get a 200 and we can see the user was indeed created. We also get our XAuth header sitting right here. I can go ahead and grab this, add it to my clipboard, and we can make some secure requests. For example, getting the user who's currently logged in. I'm going to go ahead and provide the header value as the XAuth header, send off the request, and in the response body, what do we get back? We get back the ID and the email as expected. Now let's go ahead and manage some to-dos using the production API. We're going to set the XAuth header equal to the value of the token. I have some body data already set up, so I can go ahead and send off this one. And down below, we have our to-do item. I'm going to make a second one as well. Eat some food. Not that I need to remind myself to do this. I can send that off, and now we have two to-dos inside of the database. I'm going to make a get to-dos call next to confirm that the to-dos were indeed added to the database. I'm going to add the XAuth header, send this one off, and down below we get our call back. We have a 200 status code, which is great, and we have the two to-do items we just created. From here, we can go ahead and play around with a few other routes. I'm going to take this first to-do, and I'm going to try to update it using patch. I can go into patch. I can update the body, setting completed to true and setting the text equal to nothing. I'm not going to update the text. Then I can update the ID inside of the URL, and I can grab the XAuth header value from one of the previous requests. Headers, XAuth, I'm going to grab that old value, move into the patch call, and add it right here. There we go. Now we're updating one of the to-dos we just created. We're properly logged in, and all we're doing is toggling it from false to true. If I send this off, down below we get back the new to-do. We see that completed is equal to true, and we now have a completed at timestamp as well, which is fantastic. Last up, let's try to delete the to-do item and make sure that works also. I'm going to go ahead and grab the ID, open up the delete to-do call, paste the ID right in here, and then we can go ahead and grab the XAuth header from one of the previous requests. I'm going to paste that into the headers section, x-auth, putting it right here. We can send off this one, and we get a 200 back with our to-do, the to-do that just got removed. If we now go back to the old get to-dos request and rerun it down below, we should see we just have one to-do item in place. Last up, let's log out. I'm going to grab the XAuth header we've been using all along, head to the delete users me token call, pass in the proper token value, send it off, and we get a 200. Now, if we try to make any of the previous calls like get to-dos, we're going to get a 401 unauthorized. And that is because we have logged out, destroying that token. Now, all of this was also updated inside of RoboMongo. If I refresh the connection and open up the collections list, you can now see we have the to-dos collection and the users collection. And inside of there, we have all the appropriate data. We have our user sitting right here. The password is successfully hashed using bcrypt. And inside of the to-dos collection, we have our document with our one to-do item. Now that we have this in place, we are done with the to-do application. I hope you had a good time setting up this API, learning how to create and test endpoints, setting up Mongoose and MongoDB, managing configuration using Postman and RoboMongo. I know it was a lot in the last two sections, but this is one of the most real-world Node app examples. I've created applications so similar to this for clients. Obviously, it wasn't a to-do API, it was to manage something else, but the techniques are identical. I used the exact same tool sets when creating those apps, including Heroku for deploying my applications. Now we are done, but I am going to run into the terminal, and for sanity's sake, run git status one more time just to make sure no files were changed. We can see none were, so that is it. That's it for this section. It's also it for the to-do API. Once again, thanks for joining me. I will see you in the next section. Stay tuned.